that are customers of ours, you probably know a bit more about who we are and what we do. But for those of you who have not dealt with JourneyTEAM very much or at all in the past, we're about just over 120 members, growing daily. We've worked with over 300 active customers in the past 12 months and completed over 1,300 projects in the past 5 years, of which 90% of the customer projects we have completed are referenceable. We have been around for 27 years, been named Microsoft Partner of the Year in Dynamics for two times over the last several years. We have 14 gold and silver Microsoft competencies covering most of the products here that you will see shortly. And our employees really like working here, as they've voted us 3 times in a row now best places to work. As far as our depth and breadth of what we do, you're going to see a lot of stuff on the screen of what we do, and basically anything Microsoft does, we do. But the way we're structured is we're built out into 6 different practices. So we have an ERP practice, which covers your core accounting and finance, supply chain, manufacturing, and operations aspects of an enterprise resource planning solution. We have a customer relationship management or CRM practice, which covers all the Dynamics 365 CRM modules, your core sales, marketing, customer service traditional modules. But in addition to that, we have a strong specialty in call center, field service, and also Power Apps and development around those modules as well. Our cloud practice, of which Jamie and Hector are part of, is our Office 365 and M365 practice, focusing on everything that Microsoft refers to under the modern workplace portfolio, including your obviously email, chat, and meetings, identity management, authentication, and cloud strategy and security. So we're going to talk a bit about that as we go through the presentation today. Our collaboration and content management practice focuses primarily on the SharePoint and Microsoft Teams aspects for collaboration, portals, workflows and automations, and document management and retention and things such as that. Our data and BI practice specializes in all the Power Platform capabilities, including Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents. Also focuses on the Azure cloud and infrastructure with Azure data warehousing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and chatbots. And last but not least, our change management and adoption practice is something that really transcends all these different practices that we leverage into really onboarding and driving the communications around our projects and putting the training curriculum and everything to make a successful go live rather than just dropping a piece of new functionality or a new solution on somebody's plate. We build out a strategic process for onboarding these people to have a successful go live. If you do have any questions about those, feel free to post those in the survey at the end or want to follow up on anything. Otherwise, you can always do info at JourneyTEAM.com or reach out to your direct account manager if you have one. And without further ado, I will hand off to Hector and Jamie.
So today, as you've seen, our presentation is about digital transformation maturity. What more can your cloud do? Okay, we're going to be talking about several different things that I hope, regardless of where you're coming from, if you're just looking at the cloud, at Microsoft 365 as a possible landing spot for you and your organization, or if you're already using Microsoft 365 and have been using it for a while, hopefully the things that we talk about are pertinent throughout the gamut of those two use cases there. We think that the things that we've prepared are definitely things that could be taken by any organization, applied in many different ways, and of course, JourneyTEAM, being there to help along the way. So without further ado, just a quick introduction for me. I am part of the cloud practice here at JourneyTEAM. I've been at JourneyTEAM for almost 6 years now. Been doing consulting work since then. I am a Microsoft 365 certified enterprise administrator and security administrator as well. And that just means that I've been working in this area for way too long, probably. Um, but anyhow, so that's me. I have a lot of love for tech in general, but Microsoft and all of its enterprise tools have been more or less paying the bills for a little while, right? So here we are. Jamie?
Hey guys, welcome to the session. This is, as Hector mentioned, going to be a pretty broad discussion about things to probably get you thinking more than actually doing, because sometimes you need to think things through before you start flipping switches, right? And so I'm a senior cloud solutions consultant on the cloud team, been with JourneyTEAM for about 2.5 years. Previous life, I did the same type of thing for about 7 years before that. So I've been consulting on the Microsoft stack for quite some time. I'll mention a little bit about that here in a minute. So obviously certifications means that I take some exams and things like that. Anybody can do it, I guess. So yeah, with that, we'll get started. I'll pass it back to Hector for the agenda.
Great. All right. So first and foremost, we'll talk about a maturity model, and that will go into what a Microsoft 365 maturity model is, some important distinctions and things to recognize as you think about a Microsoft 365 maturity model. We'll be talking about those types of things. We'll be talking about the fact that it is not a sprint, but it is a marathon. It takes time. It takes planning. It is not, an over the night change in your organization, regardless of how feasible it may seem. We also will have a moment to pass over to one of our clients, Barry Law Firm. We have Gordon Bjorman here with us. I have had the privilege of working with Gordon and his group for the better part of this year, and he's been fantastic to work with. And we saw a great opportunity for him to share some thoughts in relation to Barry Law Firm's journey to the cloud, what that's been like, and hopefully that kind of helps a lot of you recognize as well some of the things that they've learned as they've taken steps toward more cloud focused, cloud first type of adoption in their organization. So in just a few minutes, we'll hand over some time over to Gordon to share some thoughts. We'll also be talking through licensing, because Microsoft licensing is everybody's favorite, right? So we wanted to spend some time and talk a little bit about that and why that's so important to consider in relation to your cloud maturity. And the last two pieces here is talking about some foundational aspects of cloud maturity. Before you get going, what are things that you should ideally focus on and then move forward with? And so we'll talk about several different things to keep in mind as you start to plan that out. And then we'll provide you with some next steps. What are things that you can do coming out of this session to either start maturing in the space or to continue your maturity in the cloud space. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jamie to kind of set the stage for us in relation to maturity model. You're on mute, Jamie.
I forget to unmute because I don't want to make any noise while you're talking and distract you.
Okay.
As if my picture in the camera is not enough of a distraction. So yeah, as we mentioned earlier, this is going to be a little bit higher level presentation. It's really kind of a summary or pulling together of a lot of different presentations that not just cloud's making, but the cloud practice, but the other practices are making, right? And it's a thing that we used to think about in different terms, but in the modern technology world with cloud, there are so many different things that you have to bring to bear. We're going to call them areas of focus, and we'll talk about them later. But it was just a decade ago that my former company that I worked for, we made 90% of our revenue from implementing on-prem SharePoint. That was just like 10 years ago, guys. And so, SharePoint was Microsoft's flagship business at the time. I think it was about 80% of the businesses in the world at that time had some implementation of SharePoint. It was the thing. Microsoft built up their cloud platform, eventually moved SharePoint online, right, which now is just a portion of a much, much larger platform, and is not even, in my opinion, unfortunately, sorry, SharePoint team, the primary focus of using the Microsoft cloud system, right? One of the foundational pieces we'll talk about a little bit more in the end. And if any of you attended Eric's presentation earlier, and he'll do that again tomorrow, I believe, he talks a lot about this as well. The identity, your identity and access management is going to be very foundational, but we've moved from document management with SharePoint as the driver to a modern authentication and federation combined with complicated access and content protection and virtual computing. So there's a lot of change that's happened just in the last decade or so, and it's picking up pace. So if you were ever hesitant towards the cloud, you're going to either be struggling to stay up or catch up, or you may just fall behind. So along the way, I remember all the concerns about security in the cloud and not trusting transactions and content on the internet. And now the number one retailer on the planet only exists on the internet. People can't put content on the internet fast enough, and we have insurance for identities. So the world's changed drastically. And a lot of times what we find is there are many customers we come to who, by no fault of their own, just through the experience they've had, right, working in technology. I've been doing it for 2 decades. So there are some paradigms that we either don't want to let go of, or we really like, and we like them better than what we think we're going to find on the other side of the coin when we move to a more modern cloud-based scenario. And so there's a challenge there with that antiquated paradigm that sometimes can cause us to hesitate or to make really siloed decisions, if you will, right? So this slide, for example, just shows the security-related services of Microsoft 365. This is just the security side of things, right? But it does cross and overlap things like identity, devices, content, and data, right? And all those overlaps also include the fact that those are workloads that alone, in and of themselves, some of those might require 2 to 3 full-time employees or more, depending on the size of your organization, right? So moving to the cloud is one thing, but maturing into the cloud is another, and it's so much more. But it does require a little thought and planning, and that's kind of what we're going to try to do here. We're going to dig into some concepts and some observations around maturity model for the cloud. And this could be applied to anything. We focus obviously in Microsoft 365 in the cloud space there, but we know plenty of folks that are using third-party SaaS applications. Some folks have servers over in AWS, for example. All those things can be leveraged together, but you have to think it through a little bit. And just because you can flip a switch doesn't mean you should, right? Or maybe not as fast as you think you can, right? Just because it's easy to do. So I want you to start thinking about, where are we strong? What areas are we strong? We talk about our areas of focus here in a minute. And where are we weak? What's a priority for us as far as an area that we want to move towards? Do we have the will to put the resources and the capital, near term and long term, to make those happen, right? So with that, what I want to do now is hand it back over to Hector and let him start to kind of introduce the concept and the structure of a maturity model.
Perfect. So to kind of lay the groundwork here in relation to a maturity model, we actually look at a system that was developed back in 1986 by Carnegie Mellon University. And the purpose of this was to be able to focus on software development and to be able to build upon what they currently had in place and optimize processes along the way as they developed a new product. So in other words, the premise is if you could measure yourself against a clear set of standards to identify where your practice and capability stood, you could take concrete steps to progress to the next level. And as you see here, there are 5 different levels, starting from initial, moving up all the way to level 5 and optimizing. And each and every one of those has a small description below it, as you can see there, right? So starting from the bottom, if you think about technology as a whole, and not just necessarily, again, like what we're focusing on Microsoft 365, but just as a whole, something you're trying to build, something you're trying to solve, right? There's a process, or there's a lack of process possibly in relation to what you are trying to resolve. So starting from the very bottom, you can see in a initial level, there's a scenario where there are no processes that are really in place. Processes are unpredictable, they're poorly controlled, and completely reactive, right? I remember back years ago, I was in an enterprise setting, and we had what we thought were certain practices in place. But in the end, everything we were doing was very reactive. Something would happen, and then we'd go and try to fix it, rather than having processes in place to audit, to see how those systems were really running and potential downfalls so we could get ahead of it. We were just waiting for things to happen, and then we'd go and do and fix. So that's kind of a first level. Second level managed, as you see there, processes are characterized for projects and are often reactive as well. So still slightly a little better, right? We have some processes in place, maybe for specific projects, but still a bit reactive. And then the further we move up, all the way up to optimizing, I'm just going to skip a little bit of the descriptors here. We get to level 5 where you're optimizing. You're focused on process improvement. So you've reached a level where you've built out a solution. You are iterating on that solution and finding ways to optimize it continually, right? You understand the process. Your organization understands the process. You have the technical expertise within the organization to be able to iterate on that over and over again. And so it gets better and better, right? And so the idea here is that we can apply this maturity model in various different areas within what we do. And in this case, a cloud maturity model, right? As we look at our cloud landscape, meaning you and your organizations, you can think about different areas within your org where this could be applicable, right? And so the point is, this doesn't just apply to Microsoft. Obviously, this doesn't just apply to one particular set of solutions. It should apply to everything, both at a holistic type of view, but also a very granular view. So the more we mature in specific areas in our cloud maturity model and specific feature sets, et cetera, as a whole, we're going to be making strides in our maturity model, increasing in levels in those areas. So that said, just a few ideas, or kind of a tool set of sorts that that we want to provide in relation to a Microsoft 365 maturity model and how we can really apply that. So first and foremost, it's just to start off with this. It's not just about IT and the tech, right? We have to understand what the business is doing. What is our business about? And look at the tech as the enabler for our business to become more efficient, right? So as this says, we look at things a little bit unbiased, right? At JourneyTEAM, yes, we specialize in Microsoft Enterprise solutions. It doesn't mean that we're always going to tell you that Microsoft is the way to go 100% of the time. Sometimes there are tools out there that may fit the bill much better than some of the solutions that Microsoft has, right? And so that's important to take into account. So we're informed by, but not driven by today's features in any specific platform, including Microsoft's. We're led by business needs rather than technology features. Again, there's been times where we've had some projects where we're trying to deploy some type of feature, right? And I like to ask the question sometimes about whether or not the company has a policy that backs the technology that we're trying to deploy, right? And this sometimes has to do with a lot of the data compliance, information protection types of things that we do at times, because there could be some confusion. If the business doesn't really understand why IT is doing what they're doing, there's some kind of disconnect there. And so it always helps to have the business understanding um, and having the tech to back up everything that the business is trying to drive forward. So that's an important point there. Identifying key business and technical competencies. So in short, going from a small organization to an enterprise size organization, what are some of the differences there in relation to your technical resources and even business resources, right? Do you have the manpower to be able to deploy a whole system over a period of time of 3 months, right? Do you have the manpower, the technical expertise to be able to not just click the buttons like Jamie was saying, because that's the easy part, but to actually communicate, to train, to get everybody up to par in relation to their technical savvy, to be able to use the tools that will be used in the organization. That's important to recognize. You have to evaluate your current state in a systemic and consistent way, and this is iterative. This you'll do over and over again. After you deploy something, you got to come back and take a look to see how it's going. You know, a few months later, what can we tweak in the organization to make it a better experience for end users using a particular set of tools in tech. And then we keep in mind the fact that everything we're doing should span various roles in the organization, right? When we work in tech, I think we get a little too focused on the tech, on the features, on the tools, right? We should remember that there's a very human aspect to everything that is done within the organization, right? We could have a set of users who are very tech savvy that that grab a hold of something and can go along with it. Great. But then there might be some other high touch groups that need our help to really understand how to use these tools, how to make them more effective as well. So we have to be aware of that whole set of differences within our organization, I think, to have a successful deployment. And as we talk about this maturity model, we have to take into account the humans behind the computers, your devices, to make a deployment, maturity, etc., successful as time goes on. So with that, Jamie's going to talk a little bit about some of the areas that we'd like to focus on as we talk about a maturity model within Microsoft 365.
Yeah, what I kind of like to call this are the areas of focus, right? Because as technologists, we tend to focus, as Hector mentioned, on the technology, and we can really geek out on the fact that this is going to do that or this is going to provide this. And even from a business perspective, the management side of the business can say this is really going to save us money or this is really going to make us more efficient. Again, reiterating what Hector was saying, kind of trying to summarize a little bit of that, is when you look at something like identity and access management or collaboration, those things tend to overlap and weave once you get into the cloud a lot more than they used to do when we were in kind of the older technology mindset. So, an example might be something, I'll give you a couple of examples. One example might be something like you have the desire to make sure that your content is properly secured, and you're not sending things to outside that shouldn't go outside the organization, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that could be a policy around that particular content, right? A DLP policy, it could be a labeling policy, something along those, a retention policy. But those all have to play along with things like, where are those deployed? Are they deployed into Teams, into SharePoint, into OneDrive, into Exchange? Are we talking about can you only do things from compliant devices? So now we've reached over into the devices world. So once you start saying that you want to do one particular thing, what you're really talking about is defining those areas of focus. And you want to break those down into what the platform covers more so than the switches that you want to flip, right? Evaluate where you are in those areas. And to the point of the maturity model that Hector shared earlier, you may be a 3 or 4 on the security side of things, but down here on collaboration or even communication, you may be down in the 2 mark, right? And so and when you find those weakness spots or the spots where you need to mature a little bit, you want to see if you can put things in place that will begin to bring them up to match so that you can move them all forward together. Because what we have found in our experience is that that's always the case, right? Most organizations are more mature in one area than they are in another. And then they try to move forward in that area that they're already maturing because of the one they like and the one they're comfortable with and the one they know. But they're leaving behind some other sections, and the adoption or the actual business process suffers, or the business process isn't mature and the technology is not there to back it, or something along those lines. So analytics and insights, a big one he was talking about, the ability to actually identify if you have an actual issue. Is it a false positive? Is it happening on the regular, or is it something that just is a one-time thing I can ignore because somebody was not quite fully enrolled with their device or something along those lines of that day, and it was fixing itself that night, kind of a thing. So another example would be MFA, which everyone should be implementing, whether it's Microsoft's MFA or Duo or somebody else. You need MFA on everything you touch. But MFA in the organization, I would recommend you do it on your personal stuff too. But MFA is a security play, okay? Yet the thing that triggers that is access with an identity. So right there, you've already crossed one line from a security risk or a security strategy into the identity and access management strategy. Well, then you have to ask yourself, do my end users, because we've come across customers where the end users don't even know what that is. Some customers actually have used flip phones. And MFA with an application on a smartphone is difficult on a flip phone. And I'm not talking about the new ones with the nice screens. I'm talking about the old flip phones, right? The old StarTACs. And so those kind of things do still exist. And there are people that you'll run into in organizations that have that scenario. Now, obviously, it's probably an exception. But the point is, could you communicate, or are you working on communicating that and educating your end users so that they can actually take advantage of the technology? You're trying to make their life better. You're trying to get them home by 5 o'clock, right? So they can go to soccer practice and those things. And doing that helps you become more efficient. It builds a better culture, which is a completely different thought process than where you were originally when you were thinking, I just want to roll out MFA. So you have to consider all of these things, and all we're trying to do here is open up your mind a little bit, especially for those guys like me on the call that are real tech and love to geek. The one thing I've learned over the years of working and helping customers implement technology is most of the time we get a little bit of a tunnel vision scenario going, and we got to consider these other things. And for those of the folks that are on the call that are business side, you guys need to help the technologists, give them a little grace, right? And let's see if we can work together as a team to mature all the different areas of the business so that we're moving forward. Because technology is no longer a cost center. It now becomes a requirement for doing business. Back in the day, it was just a thing everybody hated having to pay for. Now it's something that has to happen because everything is driven that way. And if you move towards the cloud and you want to start becoming more cloud dependent, you have to mature in all of these areas. You can't just mature in the technical areas. And to that point, I want to hand it back over to Hector, who has, I think, a very unique case study with Gordon and Barry Law, and about how they worked through some of these things and started to discover these exact concepts.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, we're happy to have Gordon Bjorman here with us today. Like I mentioned, Gordon works for Barry Law. I'll have him introduce himself, but we've been privileged to work with him and his group, and I'll just hand it over to him as he talks about a little bit of how Barry Law has taken this idea of a cloud maturity model and has applied it to them.
Great, Hector. Hey, thanks for the introduction. I've been to several summits over the last few years. Some of them virtual, some of them not. So if you've been asleep while everyone's talking, I'm not a sales guy and I'm not a tech guy. So now's the time to get some real information. So I'll try to kick it up a notch and wake you up. Hey, my name's Gordon, and I work for the Berry Law Firm, but I didn't always work for the Berry Law Firm. In a previous career, I was in the United States Army. I'm a retired Army colonel, and I used to manage large networks. And today's not about me. There's no LinkedIn profile link in these slides. But as a referential frame, I was asked to come here by a friend who runs the firm. He said, "Hey, I'm taking over my dad's law firm. We're doing everything different now. We're going to go high tech. And you've managed big, large Army networks before. Can you help me?" And I'm thinking, sure. How hard could this be? All right. So with that said, let me walk you through a little bit. Now, just like anything else we do, we have to define the requirement first. So I'm going to describe the Berry Law Firm. The users that they have here work in 3 different practice areas. They have a national practice where they do veteran disability law. They have a regional practice where they do personal injury. And then they have a statewide practice where they do criminal. So when we talk about the users here, there's different categories. And sometimes an attorney works in one of these categories, but also in another. So the environment they have here is that since they've been a member of the Forbes Income 5000 the last 3 years running and doubled revenue every 2 years for the last few cycles, our user count's been progressing. 35, 60, now we're at about 100. But it's not the same users. Of the 30 attorneys we have now, only 25 of them were here 2 years ago. The support that we try to use is that we support users on-premise and remotely, and we do this with our partners. We really count on our partners. That's my point today, is about partnerships. And then we also have an aggressive national marketing campaign. Now, those of you who are working in business, you know what that means. If you're supporting IT in the business world, that means we have an aggressive group of people that know everything about tech because they have an app on their phone and they're dangerous. And then, what have we really changed in the last 3 months? Well, the day I showed up, I ran SolarWinds in the environment and found 8 different versions of Windows OS here. And, right away I figured out, well, the reason why the conference room computers don't talk to the rest of the domain is because, Windows 10 Home is not an operating system that can do that. So we're all on one OS. We have migrated every one of our SaaS or line of business applications to the cloud, and they're all SaaS. One of the first things we had to do was establish a great security footprint to secure what we have while we identify what we have. There's about 32 terabytes of unstructured data here. By the time we ran deduplication and some other tools on it, there's about 5 terabytes of usable data. But we had to secure all 32 until we could work through those things. We also have integrations that work with a lot of our platforms. And then right now we are transitioning to a largely analytical and business intelligence data-driven environment to make all of our decisions. Those are all the buzzwords. It's the new paradigm shift. We're going to talk about analytics. But then collaboration in our teams is also something that's changed in the last 36 months. When we look at our teams here, in the past, they were all in a building built in 1896 with small little offices. It was a former bank. So huge concrete walls. Couldn't figure out why no one could print to the printer that was connected wirelessly inside the old safe with 2-foot wide cement walls. But those are the details. We'll get through that. But as we looked at the entire environment, one of the main things I had to bring to them is that when I was listening to what Ted and Jamie were introducing as far as those complicated slides of the Microsoft environment, I'm having flashbacks. I'm getting nervous. I'm getting a tick because that's exactly what we wanted to do. And the reason why we wanted to do that is because that's the vision I brought from my previous engagement, my previous role. And we knew where Microsoft was going. We knew how we were going to scale. We knew we were going to do all these things. But how do you do that in a non-technical company? In a company whose whole service delivery model is professional service. It's about that human interaction. And that goes to what Hector was talking about when we were talking about planning to manage the production environment while you're doing the changes. And let's face it, we're in the law practice of law at this firm. I'm not a lawyer, but all the revenue generators here, and they are lawyers, and we have to customize our approach to them. Not only because the vertical as a whole that they're in works at a glacial pace, but sometimes the courts they're in work at a glacial pace. And so one of our competitive advantages that we started working on in 2018 was we were going to do all those things that we showed on that last 36 months area, and we were going to do them now. Then COVID hit. And at the end of the day, we started losing some of our competitive advantage because now everyone wants to go remote. This glacial pace of the legal vertical is suddenly now a race. Now, luckily for us, we understood that it was a marathon, not a sprint. But let me tell you a little bit about our journey as we go through. I should have clicked earlier. This is my little graphic for structuring the data. It was a pile of Legos. And every time I came in to talk to anyone, I was barefoot, walking through their rooms. Just stepping all the painful Legos, and so this is how I articulate data structuring to attorneys. I highly recommend using graphics like this to communicate with your team. But anyway, how do we get here? Well, let's talk about this in terms of the maturity model. And when we first started, I came in, we were down here. And, we started working with their local partners, their local MSPs, some of these other folks, the people that were in charge of that cassette tape that was in the basement that was running the voicemail. We started working with them and trying to identify what we had. And we worked with a local partner who said they knew everything that we needed about the Microsoft environment. And so we were hopeful. However, as we went, and so we built this plan and we said, hey, we're going to define this. And I had to do a lot of the homework for them because they were asking me hard questions like, what is the requirement? And those are great questions. So we were building out security groups, structures, building out OUs, building out all kinds of containers, ways to structure ourselves and establish some governance with the on-prem resources. But then when it came time to start doing the delivery, what they showed us was not what we asked for. Basically we had Active Directory on steroids. Our problem was not an IT problem. Our problem was not how to better manage Active Directory. Our problem was how to deliver legal services to our clients who are in the fight of their life, sometimes fighting the government, which has all of the money in the world, all the resources because they have all of your tax dollars. How do we give the best service to our clients and do that through efficiency? We'll never beat the government on scale. We just have to be better. And so when we got the first set of capability improvements from the MSP, it was awful. So what did we do? Well, we redefined the requirement and we said we no longer need to work with a local MSP. So we fired them and we got a new MSP. And you know what? They were even better. You know why they were better? Because they specialize in the legal vertical and they had all these great sales teams and they had all the right slides. They had all the maturity model slides. They had all the right things. And we signed the contract and we went forward with them. And then as we were going through, this is what it looked like when we were talking with them. Because at the end of the day, they didn't know what they were doing. They wanted to go to the Microsoft environment, but they weren't actually there. And it went so far as that one of their lead customer service managers called, said, hey, I understand that things aren't going well. Part of the problem is you're trying to go to Microsoft, and I don't know any professionals that want to put their whole infrastructure in the Microsoft cloud. My only retort was, oh, you mean other than the blue chip players, Wall Street, the people that make real money, not run a tier 0 help desk remotely. So we fired them too. And now here's where we are. Same model, same idea. But where we are now is completely different. It's the same set of capabilities that Ted showed on that slide 1. There's a lot of things that are in the Microsoft ecosystem, and they do a great job of explaining it to the customers that you can do all of this and you can do it yourself and life is going to be easy. And then you go to start to do the implementation and suddenly you're 15 clicks in to the documentation. So one of the things that was really helpful for us is we found a partner who understood the entire ecosystem. One of the problems we had with our previous vendors that when I wanted to secure the environment first. So of course, what was one of the first things I did? MFA, two-factor authentication on the BYOD mobile devices, because they all had data on their phones. But the MFA broke something else, because Microsoft is like the ecosystem is like a spider web. You shake one end and then the other shakes as well. So for us, having a partner that was able to understand the entire ecosystem was helpful to us. The other thing that we found was that we wanted a partner that didn't want to do our help desk. And to us, that was important, because tier 0 help desk, teaching a brand new attorney how to right click with the mouse, that's not something I want to have outsourced to a vendor. I want to be able to send someone on site, do that education. And so finding a vendor who understood the value of the Microsoft system and how to implement that system, and then would work with me to create that obligation to do the change management inside my own firm, but give me the tools to do it, that was where we started. Then as we went through, first thing we did, we put security in line with the typical triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability. But we did it in a way that we were able to go through and support the attorneys for mobile. Because remember, this is all about the production environment. So while we're doing all of these things, no longer am I having to say, hey, yeah, the MSP kind of, they didn't understand that you can't apply policy to a container. You can only apply policy to an OU. And by the way, they got rid of all the device policies and made them all user policies. So now all of your logins take forever every time you log in everywhere. We didn't have that anymore. And so we were able to get credibility with our team while we were doing mobility and scaling. And so for us, that was important. Now, where do we think we're going to go? You might think that this is just some sort of shill for the JourneyTEAM. I'm a paid advisor. No, I'm not. The only reason why I'm here is Hector promised me I can get out of my own leadership team meeting and hang out with a bunch of people that were good at tech. And so when we're talking about where we're going, I don't see us ever getting to level 5. And the reason why is, if you go back to our previous slide, our goal was to get to the what's next in our line of business software, get to the what's next in how we communicate as a law firm, to have a competitive advantage, to go out there and beat our opposition on behalf of our clients. Some of our clients, we're waiting for a verdict right now. There's a jury trial going on, and there's someone who's falsely accused, and it's painful. There's video. We can all see it. But when we walk in that room, there were 10 Department of Justice lawyers. They had 4 IT people. The version of the video they showed was slightly enhanced, better than the version that we showed. So those are the kinds of efficiencies that we need to have to bring to our clients. And so we're always going to be progressing. So when we look at the maturity model, we see that no matter how successful we are, we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're always going to be between 4 and 5. But the difference is that we built with a baseline. And when I talk about my previous MSPs, 1 and 2, they're great people. They all meant well. But at the end of the day, they weren't experts. They weren't professionals. And more importantly, they weren't partners. Because when things went poorly, they weren't there with me. And at the end of the day, I need someone who understands that printing a piece of paper is an emergency. If you're falsely accused in some rural county out in, middle of nowhere, whatever state you're in, and they only accept analog fax communication to get you out of jail on a Friday night. Otherwise, you're going to be there for the whole weekend of your daughter's wedding. So for us to be able to print a paper to load it into an analog fax machine, that's a big deal. And when we talk with managed service providers and they think of your production environment as being intellectually challenging, that's the wrong answer. And for us, we didn't want to have partners that saw us as a challenge. We weren't the product. They saw us as a partner and our mission to get that fax to that rural county so that man could go to his daughter's wedding the next day. That's a true story. It's very similar to the My Cousin Vinny situation, except it was just excessive speed. I mean, if you have a Ferrari, drive it. So anyway, so where are we going? Here's my recommendations. For all of you in the audience that are in business, I don't even have my email address in here, but you can find me. And if you want to have, offline talk, I'm all about this. I'm passionate about tech. I'm passionate about defensive operations for the cyber community. I'm passionate about how we can make things work for our users. But the number one thing that I've learned working in the civilian community is just, number one, stop working with amateurs. Because at the end of the day, if it's not working and it's taking a year, fire him. Let it go. It's like the monkey with the banana. He couldn't let go of the banana to free his hand. He was holding on to that banana forever. Just let him go. Find partners where they are. The other thing is, manage your expectations inside the firm. Let them know that you're going to have a journey. You're going to have someone with you. And that was the thing that resonated with me about JourneyTEAM, is that they asked me, say, hey, we're not going to do it for you. We're going to be your Sherpa. We're going to help you get through. But you can't just turn over your law practice to us and expect it to work, and your users are going to be blessed with digital literacy. That's not the way it works. So I appreciated that they understood that I needed them to carry the heavy stuff so I could carry the light stuff, but we were still climbing the same mountain together. I appreciated that. But then the last thing is continue doing what we all do. Document first, do your actions second. Have a plan. I have found that collaborating with people by looking at a plan, it really helps inform the rest of the maturity model, because it gives us, we're all human. We can't remember what we wanted 4 weeks ago, but we also count on other people to give us feedback. And then follow the plan and adapt. That's my view of the maturity model. And to me, before you start with step one, you have to have good people with you. So with that, I'll pass it back to you. And our marketing team would be mad if I didn't throw up our phone number, but there it is. If you're calling me, trying to get a hold of me to talk about our journey and maybe some of the lessons learned we had from a practical manner, don't tell them you're from a vendor, otherwise our intake team will put you into cold call hell, and you'll end up in voicemail that I don't check.
Thanks, Gordon. That's fantastic. No, I appreciate you sharing your experience with us, and I hope everybody that's on the call is able to take some good things out of that. Much appreciated. Go ahead, Jamie.
All right, so let me jump right back in here. So it's been mentioned, it's been said, and I'm going to run through this really quick because we've kind of been, we're starting to beat a dead horse, but there's a reason why we're doing this. So many people still try to get on this horse and ride it, even though it's laying there. It's not a sprint, it is a marathon. And a lot of folks get in there and they get excited because most of the customers we get come to us because a business driver, something somewhere on the business side, has said we need to do X, and they want to come to us because they've looked and said, oh, we're paying for this in our licensing over here for, in this case, Microsoft 365, and we can just flip this switch on. Can you make sure we're going to flip this switch on right at the right time? And we say yes, but that switch is connected to Gordon's point through spider webs, right, to about 15 to 20 to maybe even 100 other switches, depending on what you're trying to implement. And so it is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And when you start to run, I'm not a runner. I was when I was younger, but I've grown up and I pay people to run for me now. I'm not a marathon runner, but the folks that I know that are friends of mine that do that, they didn't start running, umpteen miles first day. They started very slowly and built it up, because you got to build that foundation. And maturity is not about the speed of your implementation. You got to make sure you've got resources in place. Do you have enough of them? Do you have your teams built properly? Are those teams over the right pieces of technology? Are they collaborating well? Do you have the expertise? And if you don't, can you go find that expertise, to Gordon's point, right? And this is a big one that most people don't go for, and I'm going to hang here for a second, and that is change. It's the only constant in life. We're always told that, right? But yet when we do it in business, we don't always, for lack of a better term, massage that through the organization. And our change management practice doesn't get enough kudos most of the time, because that is, to the point that Ted made earlier, it is woven throughout everything that you do from a technology standpoint. If your end users don't understand the why and how and or what they're supposed to do, or some combination thereof, most of the time you'll meet resistance. Or best case scenario, you're going to get a lot more help desk tickets to help them understand what's going on, right? Capital's a big question. Some smaller companies are trying to grow up. We can help you get to that, having the right ideas around what you need to be purchasing now versus later to save money now, and then as you mature into it, spend some more money later. That's a big thing. Licensing is one of those biggest expenses. And so, to keep from belaboring the point, an experienced trainer can help you run faster and further. I'm going to hand it back over to Hector to talk a little bit about the licensing.
You're on mute, Hector.
Muted. It's a bad habit, right?
That's embarrassing. All right. So Microsoft 365 licensing is not the funnest topic to have, but it is an important one nevertheless. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of little details to know about. The way I like to think about it is building a house, right? When we first built our first house, we looked at different builders and we saw that different builders had, things that we liked that others didn't. Some included some cool features built into the base price and that others didn't. Others required premium prices to include things that maybe some others just included in their base prices. So with licensing, in Microsoft 365 licensing, keep in mind that familiarity with it is going to be key in being able to roll out features that your organization will be interested in, and obviously in relation to the maturity model, a lot, maybe way too much up front, but understanding what that is up front will help you make decisions in the future. So real quick here. There are two segments of licensing that you'll see here: information worker plans and frontline worker plans. Focusing on the information worker plans, just think of office workers when you hear that, okay? Within that, you have Microsoft 365 plans, and then you have Office 365 plans. And in addition, you have enterprise mobility and security. Windows 10 is Windows 10, okay? The big differentiator here is that for a few years, when Office 365 became a thing, there was the Office 365 licensing SKUs and options. They then introduced some security features and device management features, which you could add on to that Office 365 SKU. And so you would add, you'd basically have a combination of these two as you matured in the space. Now, a couple of years ago, a little over that, Microsoft introduced a Microsoft 365 bundles. And that more or less, just keep in mind that it is really a combination of what you get with Office 365 and enterprise mobility and security. They've just bundled it all up here and have made that available. So it's a comparatively priced as you combine these two over here. On this side of the fence, really the Microsoft 365 is comparable in price, okay? Moving on here, frontline worker plans are very similar. They have Microsoft 365 plans and Office 365 plans. Not going to focus too much about all the details there, but good to know. And you'll see under each of these, there's E3s, E5s, there's some compliance, security and compliance add-ons on this side of the fence here for more advanced functionality in relation to data loss prevention and GDPR compliance type of things as well. Ultimately, come to JourneyTEAM if you have questions. We'll help you kind of understand what best fits your organization, where you should start, and where you could be going based off of these plans.
Forgot about the mute again. I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about another base thing. And licensing is one. Identity and access management strategy is probably your other big one. Those two things, when you can get those two things foundationally in place properly, you begin to set the stage to many of the points that Gordon made to building up your maturity across multiple levels in your cloud structure, right? Because everybody has to access everything everywhere now. Remote work, which has now become the standard. Everybody's discovered my secret, which I've been doing now for almost 10 years. Now everybody does it. right? It drives the need for access everywhere. Well, that drives the need for security mechanisms that we've discussed, like MFA, right? Which is a must-have in IAM, which might then need to understand how does that affect from an endpoint? Which endpoint are they coming from? A mobile device, a tablet, a laptop, the desktop on the network. Does that matter? All those different types of considerations. Do you even know what Azure App Proxy is and know why you should know what that is? Because it begins to centralize your identity and access management strategy around something like Azure AD, where you can federate out and use your SaaS apps that way. You can even federate back to on-prem applications if you need to. For those that don't know, legacy authentication in the Microsoft 365 world is going away in about a year. If you haven't already gotten rid of legacy authentication, I guarantee you someone in your organization is probably connecting to Exchange, at least Exchange, with legacy authentication. And it's the big way that bad guys get in. So Microsoft's going to cut it off for everything. You got to start planning that out, because there are people that are going to have to change a few things. Are you using conditional access? Too much of it, too little of it? You got to fine tune those things. So we're already crossing many areas of focus, right? And inside of the platform that is Microsoft 365 and Azure AD and all those different things. And then comes the big question: could you even communicate these to your end users and do that well enough that they would understand, right? So those are a lot of the challenges we've talked about today. I'm hoping we've left you with some thoughts around that, and I'm going to hand it back to Hector to let you know how you can take some next steps.
Thanks, Jamie. So as last steps, JourneyTEAM offers several different things to kind of help you identify where you're at and also make a plan for you as you mature in the Microsoft 365 space and really take advantage of your investment there. So first and foremost, we do a licensing analysis. We take a look at what you currently have, what's in use, what's your usability across the board, all the different services you're licensed for, identify some gaps there, identify ways that we can help to maybe increase use, all of those things. We also have a Microsoft 365 tenant health check that looks at several different aspects of your M365 environment, focused a lot on Azure Active Directory and a lot of security features associated with it. Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Power Platform, all those connected workloads and services that obviously depend on Azure Active Directory as the identity provider. How you're using them, we identify some gaps that will help you to be more secure, to be more robust in a lot of different areas. That's an engagement that we have, and have continued to perform on a lot of different environments and have really great experience with that. And then also a foundational identity analysis that's more focused on your identity and access and management story, where you're at today, some of the recommendations that can come out of that to move forward to start your maturity in the cloud. A lot of that Eric Roth covered in his session earlier today with AD and moving into Azure Active Directory. This analysis is basically an output of what could be. So just a few ideas of what we have at JourneyTEAM. We appreciate you joining our session, guys. We love doing what we do, and hopefully we are able to share that enthusiasm with all of you. Appreciate it.
There's a quick question just came up there. I know we're running a little bit over, but
how hard is it to switch cloud app providers, and how long of a process is it? Yeah, I think it just depends. Depends on the size of your organization. It depends on how many users you have. Depends on what cloud applications you're interested in moving and using. Most commonly, we see email being one of those first few services that push people into Microsoft 365, for example. Email is one of those core collaborative communication methods that people have. And so that tends to be one of those first workloads. From there, you kind of start to springboard into other applications within the within the platform.